Okay, first things first. I do apologize for the God rays coming from the bottom here, from the bottom right here. Uh, I'm trying something, and it's definitely not gonna be something I stick with. Obviously. Uh, Basically, I'm trying to enhance the lighting of my videos because the camera I'm using doesn't offer any light really from it whatsoever. Hence why I often look like an Oompa Loompa, but blue edition. Basically, why I kind of look like a Smurf. Oh joy. Hopefully, this helps a little bit. It's definitely not something to stick with, especially since it causes my eyes to trip out a lot. And I don't need help with that. Now, first things first, this game is going to be, this whole entire video is going to be hugely negative. It's not because I like it to be that way, it's not because I wanted it to be negative. It's because even though there are a couple of good ideas here and there, they're not really done well enough in execution. Now, granted, this is also an old game, but I figured I might as well talk about it. And there's also another reason. A lot of people, especially amongst the Final Fantasy community, love giving Final Fantasy 15 tons of crap for almost, but not, but for almost being the next Final Fantasy 13 game. Well, I don't get those people anymore because they love ignoring that a game was already released that was already a Final Fantasy 13 game with a different title. It's already happened. They already added a fourth game, but people love ignoring that. Clearly glossing over it either because of it being a prequel instead of a sequel, or just because they don't want to admit that it exists. And if it's the second reason that they don't want to admit that this game exists, I don't blame them. Because even from a Final Fantasy fan, someone who's played way too many of them, I can easily and without even so much as trying, I can tell you what the real worst Final Fantasy game actually is. And let me spoil something. Even though I admit, as someone who played Final Fantasy 9 growing up, instead of the better 7 or 10 or 12 or whatever have you, whatever one you pick, I will agree to one thing. Final Fantasy 9 is not an amazing, the best Final Fantasy game ever. Hell no. No. Let's be real here. Final Fantasy IX had tons of issues, including the fact that the only way to actually understand what's going on at the end is to be a completionist. If you don't play it as a completionist from the outset, that ending segment is going to confuse the crap out of you. Now, granted, when I say completionist, do I mean just doing tons of side stuff? No, I mean doing almost everything except for Chocobo Mail and the freaking Chocobo hide and seek crap. That's it. If it doesn't involve the mailing or racing or doing that hot and cold BS, you are going to be confused about that ending. You're going to be a little confused on what's with this giant gin sucker thing. Now, granted, if you pay attention and you do play completionist and you read between the lines a little bit, you realize what is actually happening. You know what's happening. Granted, do you like it? Do you think it's a good fight? Do you even understand why they decided to make it so you had to be a completionist just to understand it? Hell no, I don't like it. Granted, it wasn't the most boring fight I had been in the entire game, but that's not saying much. It really isn't. Now, when it comes down to it, Type O, the big focal point of this entire vid, is simple. It is a continuation of Final Fantasy XIII. Now, whether or not you personally love Type O or not, I personally hated Type O. I hated it. I was half the time bored out of my mind. The other half of the time, I was doing pointless, stupid crap for no good reason. Half the time, I was wondering who wrote this game's story, and its writing was only worse as I went on. Worse as I went on. I want you to stop and think. They had voice acting heavyweights in this game, people. Voice acting heavyweights. Anyone know of Beyblade? You know, the original show back in the early 2000s. Y'all remember that? Yeah, you remember Tyson? Guess what? He's in this. The voice actor for the English dubbed Beyblade is in this. I want you to stop and think about that. Do you understand what that means? That dude is a freaking voice acting heavyweight with tons of talent. They don't really typically try and stay too seriously. They just kind of go with the flow, laid back characters. Not the same way as Maxwell's level, but kind of just this kind of charm of we crack jokes. We don't take things too seriously. We kind of just have fun and just be us. That's the kind of characters you give this guy. He nails out of the park. You give him a lighthearted, just fun to be around, good dude, and you have a recipe for him to take that character, send it flying in popularity, and all of a sudden wonder where are all these people coming from? Why are they so invested in this? That's the kind of voice acting heavyweights that you have. You have big namers. Now, granted, sadly, I always screw up their names, which I don't want to do to some of my favorite characters, so I'm not going to try to say their real names, because if I butcher even one of them, I will never forgive myself, and I will probably force myself to watch all those shows again from the beginning as a punishment. And a joy. But oh well. You even got, when I guarantee you, some Digidestined. The original Digimon Digidestined. Uh-huh. We even got Izzy. And Izzy in everything. Izzy's in everything, man. When none of those people I just mentioned can work with a script, that's a sign how bad your writer is. People love talking about how Dinklage effed up his role as Dinklebot, but let me make sure something very clear. If you watch tons of anime, if you play tons of RPGs, JRPGs, you learn to tell when it's the voice actor and when it's the writing. This game is the writing. This game is one of those games where the writing is so bad, so very poor, with so little flexibility in how they wanted it delivered, to a point of where even with voice acting heavyweights, they couldn't make it work for them. I want you to understand something. This is a very key detail. This game should have been the bomb. Instead, it bombed. Why? Largely, and almost repetitively so, almost maddeningly so even, writing. Writing, writing, writing. So many of the problems in this game are writing. Look. It's great they had some cool ideas. I like the idea of having 12 different characters who are all equally important, who are all main characters, and who are all fighting differently. I love that idea. The problem is, though, all of it feels very kind of stiff, non-responsive. It doesn't help that the lock-on system isn't that good half the time. Other times where you're trying to target opponents who are way far away from you, that works. Opponents who are on your butt and moving around and not staying still, no, not very good. No. Making it so that this way you can target opponent and switch that targeting. How's that? Not good. In order to move your camera, you have to pick. Do you want to be able to move your camera to look at opponents who are off in a corner somewhere at your peripheral vision? Or do you want to lock onto an opponent? You have to pick. Pick. Because the same stinking stick that's used to look around is also what decides who you're targeting. From my knowledge, I don't remember being able to fix this. I can try and purposely put myself at gunpoint to go through enough of the game to be able to try and tamper with that. I think I'd rather do anything else. Anything at all. I should never feel that way. I should never feel like anything and everything is more productive, interesting, entertaining, worth my time or my sanity than play your game. I'm pretty sure when you play a game, you're not supposed to immediately feel the desire of turning off the game. I'm pretty sure games are supposed to be designed to, continue to have fun and keep playing it because you're having fun. I'm no expert. I'm definitely not. I ain't got no PhD, masters, or any of that crap, right? I got a high school diploma from a pretty meh high school. That's about it. So I should never really have to ask this question, but I'm going to ask it anyways. Who was in charge of this game aside from people who don't know how to write? I forget this time. I don't like the fact that as I'm playing this game, do I start to feel like I'm having more fun over time? No. Do I feel like I'm actually enjoying myself? No. Do I feel like the writer did an okay job? Hell no. Do I even feel like there was even one tiny thing that was actually executed well despite it being a good idea? Uh, no. No, I don't. I don't feel like there was really, even though I had a good idea, a really good idea. I loved this idea. Like, it actually got me excited again when I was already feeling like this game is trash. Ready for this? Ready for this? Alternative endings. Yes. Turns out that's trash too. What? Here's the thing. Especially when I practically played a completionist, the only thing I didn't do was grab every single chocobo. That's it. Oh, sorry, and uh, uh, I'll do all the capture the base things. Basically the MOBA stuff. I didn't doubt. I did like a couple of those. And I was just like, okay, this is lame. I'm out. Other than that, I pretty much did everything. Collect the 13. Was it 24? I can't remember anymore. Collect the stupid dog tags. Okay, cool. I'll do that, I guess. I'll keep an eye out. Did it. Wasn't really worth it, though. Try to unlock all the summonings. Haven't done that one. Why? Well, simple. It's actually this game's biggest sin of the entire thing. It's the one thing that actually makes me want to grab them by the scruff of their freaking neck and ask why. Why? Here's the only thing, in fact, that all Final Fantasy fanboys and casuals can all agree on easily and effortlessly. Summoning giant monsters to stomp other things is fun. We can all agree and attest to this. We may not always agree which one's the strongest, the best, the most interesting, the most cool. We may not always agree on that. But we can agree to the core truth that summoning a giant monster to destroy either small, meaningless peons or as a cool way of ending a boss fight, we can all agree that's fun. Here's the thing though. Type O actually manages to screw over, ruin, and piece all over the concept of summoning giant monsters. Why? Simple. Every time you summon a monster, the character who summoned the monster is dead. They are dead. So that basically means way back when in earlier games, all you had to do to be able to summon a monster was make sure the monster in games like Final Fantasy IX, Final Fantasy VIII, I think Final Fantasy VII had it too, if I remember correctly. Final Fantasy 12. Here's what you mostly needed. You needed MP. No, that was literally it. You just needed MP. That was all you needed, and all of a sudden, boom! Here comes a giant flaming hell beast to destroy my opponents by dropping a literal meteor. I I want you to think about that for a second here. These games had it just been set to MP, which was a good idea. That was a good decision. You might be thinking, how? That sounds way too unbalanced, you might think. Well, here's the thing. Just because you summon a giant hell beast who drops a giant flaming meteor on somebody doesn't mean it's a smart move. Because if your opponent heals because it took fire damage, you just healed your opponent back to full health even if they were at 1. Yeah. So you can see why it requires a little bit of thought. It requires you to understand ahead of time, does this heal the monster or not? Is this something they're weak to? Are they going to take normal damage from it? Are they resistant to it and therefore take half as much damage as they would have otherwise? There was some level of thought. You couldn't just pick one and call it a day, except for like a couple. And even then, their odds of success for their little what they did wasn't always that good. And for one of their cases, it didn't matter because it would just reduce the health by half over and over again, therefore doing less and less damage the less health they had. But other than that, though, you had Odin. No, not Odin. Like Thor's daddy. No. I'm talking about like their own version of it, where he does kind of insta kills. Granted, his insta kills are luck based, and their odds are kind of low until you get a specific item. Then it increases it from being low to just meh, and even then, luck will be a hugely deciding factor. Now, I didn't mess with Odin much in like Final Fantasy IX or stuff like that because I knew of one simple truth. I don't always have the best luck in games. I may be lucky as all crap in the real world at times, but in games it does not translate. It just don't. When it comes down to it, though, I just kind of never messed with Odin. I was like, Ifrit, Leviathan, I'll mess with all of y'all because you all are useful. If I have an opponent whose weakness is water, throw Leviathan. It's pretty much going to do double the damage now. If I have an opponent weak to fire, Ifrit, so on and so on. This game, though, they made it so that this way you don't really have a specific element. Now, instead, when you summon Ifrit, not only does a character, mind you, not be able to fight, now they are that monster instead. Wait, what? They become the monster and then die at the end, regardless of if Ifrit died or not. And it's also regardless of if you cut it off early. What? So wait. My character will die if Ifrit dies, doesn't die, gets cut off early, or uses the entire timer. What? It gets worse, though, because that's not the worst. That's like nothing. This game basically both forces and incentivizes for you to only ever play Shiva. Now, here's the thing. I don't hate Shiva. I don't hate that summoning. That summoning's aight. It wasn't my number one choice. It wasn't my favorite when it comes to cinematics in Final Fantasy IX. It was cool. It was aight. I was more bigger fan of Leviathan because of how many times Leviathan wound up accidentally saving my derriere. But oh well. Here's the thing, though. Every single freaking map in the entire stupid game is a hallway. I want you to hear me when I say this. A hallway. Now, do I mean the same way as Final Fantasy 13, where it's a completely hallway, but with a nice, background art and plenty of space above their heads? No. No, I don't. When I say a hallway, I mean like inside of an actual IRL building. That kind of hallway. With a doorway. Well, guess what? If you summon Ifrit or the new guy Golem, or at least I think he's new. I don't remember seeing him in 12. I don't remember seeing him in 10. And I definitely don't remember seeing him in 9. And I did. But I played 9 like religiously as a kid. No. No. You will only ever play as Shiva. You will only ever summon Shiva. Why, you may ask? Because every single map is a hallway with a doorway to pass through to get to the next segment. Which means if you play as Ifrit, or if you play as Golem, you're going to be walking into an invisible wall. Despite the door not being blocked off by an invisible wall. You heard me right. Out of all the summonings they have, from my knowledge, only one of them is actually small enough to go through the doorways to the next segment. Which means if you do pick Ifrit or Golem, you're going to be running in place with your head up against the door, at the door frame. It doesn't matter that you could easily, do this and get right through as Ifrit. It doesn't matter that if you play as Golem, you can, try and duck a little. It doesn't matter. You will run in place. You will wonder who was in charge of this map, making it these summonings, making it so these summonings are as worthless as they are. I can literally count on my hand how many times I wound up doing the summonings in my forced second playthrough. That's right. 5. 5 times. Now, tell me something. Do you deludedly enough think that it's because I chose to do them so many times? Because no. No, the 5 times is including the 2 or 3 times where it forces you to do that, and then 2 were for a joke. To make me laugh because I felt miserable. Now let's talk about the rubber banding, because that's here. Why is that here? I should never be bored stiff as I'm playing the game on normal half the time. Like, especially the first two bosses it introduces you to. The first boss, and you're playing as Odin, I just spammed the same freaking normal attack button. I didn't bother doing anything else, and you know what? I won. I should never win when I'm just spamming normal attacks only. I'm not even moving. I'm not dodging. I'm standing in the same place they spawned me in. The same spot they spawned me in. I haven't moved at all. All I've done is just spam the normal attack. Why? This game often causes me to wonder what moron was in charge, who thought any of this was a good idea, and who on QA decided to shove their thumbs up their rear ends instead of actually quality test the game. It doesn't help. There are tons of moments where there are quality issues. For example, there are tons of times where the game decides to lag a bit. Oh joy! Let's talk about all the times where voice acting is way off. How about we talk about the fact that even though they have voice acting heavyweights and even some talents, hidden gem talents at the ready, instead of trying to make it work or try to polish up the scripting to this way, at least those new talents could show what they've really got instead of being held back by the garbage writing and garbage scripts. Instead, we have to acknowledge the fact that we have someone who has the talent to be a literal female Geralt of Rivia. I don't know about y'all. I had never thought about what a female version of Geralt would be like. Now I've seen a little taste of it, and I'm upset because there's probably never going to be exactly that. This person probably got saddled with probably easily the worst script, and that's even comparable with Dinklebot. The only person who got the worst script would be the guy who had to play the attempt at being a thug. I use air quotes because it's not actually how a thug conducts themselves or how they talk. No. No, 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 and no. A thug attempt from them was just saying the word yo and you know almost in every single sentence. Beginning or end or middle. Didn't matter. They threw those words in. Often. I. What was this supposed to have been? All it is exactly what no one wants. No one's going to want for a long time, even. Granted, largely because of the way it's been done. This game, unlike Final Fantasy 15, which was almost a 13 continuation, you gotta remember Type O is the continuation of that franchise in the form of a prequel. That's the problem. No one wants to point out that this is a prequel either because they didn't play it or because they didn't want to acknowledge it. If it's an issue of not wanting to acknowledge that you got saddled with this piece of crap, I don't blame you. I do the same sometimes. But the thing is, this is exactly what 15 almost was. That's the thing. Type O is a prequel and not even a good prequel. If you don't believe me, let me give you the facts. Yes, I said facts. The facts are, this is a prequel. How do you know this, King? Simple. There are l'Cie. How many games have had l'Cie? Let's see. Eeny, meeny, miny. Oh yeah, 13 franchise. They didn't exist beforehand, and they didn't exist afterwards in 15 much, if at all. Maybe, do you count that one weird effer in the one who kind of just is supposed to be a villain, but just isn't interesting that much? Yeah. No. From my knowledge, there are, if one, and even then, like I said, I'm stretching it hard, and there's going to be one in the next game to come up. This, I think it's like 16 is going to be the stupid name for it or whatever. Here's the thing. If they're going to take and do this, if they're going to for some drunk reason, don't do anything like you did for Type O, Don't do anything like you did for 13, 13-2, or 13 Lightning Returns. Don't do any of those. Uh, and if you're going to try and do anything from 15, all right, keep the most bare core. That's it. Everything else burns. Okay? Here's the thing. This is just a fact, whether you want to accept it or not, isn't really much my deal. All right? There are cool ideas plenty of times, both in 13. There are some cool ideas in 13-2. There are one or two kind of like, it's not a terrible idea. God awful execution, but interesting idea. There are these things scattered about in 13. Interesting ideas or things you can take and give them the spit shine and make them workable in another game someday. The problem is execution in each one of the games so far I've mentioned has problems. Final Fantasy 13, 13-2, Lightning Returns, those got tons of issues. Far too many to actually bother considering of taking even half of the game into the future. There's no point. There isn't. Especially when you consider the fact that their biggest problems were it's too story focused at times. Other times it decides to, in 13's case, force you to be a completionist, because if you miss one item that only drops at a certain moments, you're never going to get it again. And it's kind of critical to actually beating the final boss of the game. Trying to do it without that item is hell. As someone who keeps trying, smashing his head against the wall, and begging, please God, make it stop. Yeah. That's not good. No. Here's the thing. Another thing you have to keep in mind is that for Lightning Returns, the idea of bringing back the garment system from 10-2 is a cool idea. Granted, they needed to expand on it. They needed to make it a hell of a lot more functional. They needed to make sure that it was dusted off properly. And at the same time, they needed to make it so that this way it wasn't so obvious which one to pick. They should have done that, and they didn't. Then you have another issue to deal with, the fact that the game's too grindy, which is annoying. Then you have 13-2. Do not tell people you can get a bittersweet or at least a good ending. Because that's not what was given in 13-2. No. It was either sad ending or even more sad ending. Which do you want? I grinded. I did completionist. Why am I only being given a sad ending or a sadder ending? What the hell? Yeah. When it comes down to it, 13-2's big, cool idea that's worth taking and using again someday is the idea of being able to recruit monsters onto your team. That's a cool idea. I liked doing that. I liked kind of having a monster that I really liked and buffing him up to a point where he was a beefy, destroying, heavy-duty killer. I loved that. I loved that. I didn't like tons of other aspects because of how much it felt like a grind, but I was just like, I love the idea of having a monster, my own buddy, my monster sidekick or something, and having him get buffed up to a point where he can keep up with me, a raging beast. Ugh. That was nice. That was a good feeling. Yeah, the ending sucked, but like I said, that was a cool feeling, and it was worth taking in the future someday. Here's the thing. Final Fantasy 15 has only one good thing I could say beyond a doubt needs to be carried over someday. Obviously, as much as I love camping and doing all this, kind of bro stuff and all that other stuff, I liked that. I wish that would have actually just been the story instead of the actual story that's there. But at the same time, though, I do like the idea of having my summonings, instead of them just being something like pretty decent as I was, having them be larger than life, giant ass titans taking over the entire field and just wreaking havoc, probably destroying the world in the process. But I love it. It's dope. It's cool. It's cinematic, and it kind of just gets you like, oh, did you see that? That's kind of a cool feeling. Even if, like I said, I hate what they wound up doing with the story, and I even more hate that they intentionally put plot holes in just so they can fill it in with DLC, and how they decided to overcharge their DLC aggressively for the entire first month of its release. then finally drop it down just so they can release the next wave of DLC at far more price than it's worth, then to drop it down again, and now we're kind of just stuck with nothing. Aside from a game that still has massive a ton of plot holes and complete giant sections of just fill in the blank. I shouldn't have to say this, but you should never do this. It's not rocket science to figure out that people hate this practice and it pisses people off, especially broke people like me. No one likes being shafted and then having their money jacked just so they can get shafted again. No one likes that loop. I don't think. I don't think they like the practice anyways. I don't know about you, but if I'm going to pay for something, I want to get what I'm paying for. If I'm being told it's a full game, it better be a full game. Makes sense. When it comes down to it, Type O is probably one of the worst games because it screams it should have been a service-based game. And that's never a good thing. And it doesn't help that even if we did make this a games as a service and it was still being worked on, we'd still have way too long and way too much that would need to be tweaked, altered, fixed, gutted. By the time we're done, we might as well have just made a new game and start from scratch. Now, for the next Final Fantasy game they're releasing, the one that's going to be released instead of the continuation to 7 Remake, I'm not excited for it personally. I'm just not. I think one single statement. I don't like to make these videos negative. These opinion videos aren't meant to be negative. They're more supposed to be a matter of me trying to look at something and try to be as objective as possible. But I'm going to be honest with you, this is one of those games where I can't be objective even though I want to. Even though I want to try to look at it from both sides, I kind of can't. All I can do is look at what I feel and basically spew that. And what I feel every time I touch or look or even acknowledge Type O's existence is small sense of nausea and a large chunk of annoyance, frustration, and irritation. That's about the most I can do when it comes to it. Hopefully, I'll find a way to fix the light issues and we won't need the God rays from the floor. Hopefully. I hope you laughed at me. Maybe laughed with me. Made fun of me. That's easy. Everybody can do that. I hope maybe I made you smirk or maybe... I'll see you guys eventually. And by eventually, I mean tomorrow for quite something interesting. And I do mean interesting. More interesting than most any other video I've probably made, in fact. Not like that's difficult. I will see you all tomorrow. I need a nap. See ya.